Good morning, church. On Wednesday nights, we've been going through a Bible study series where different teachers are picking Bible stories in Scripture itself, and then kind of going through them. Last week, I had the privilege of teaching, and I taught on Israel's route to the Red Sea, and we kind of went through that story. And I want to share that with you today. Before I get into the story itself, I want to ask you if you've heard any of the following idioms. Caught between a rock and a hard place. Darned if you do and darned if you don't. Between the hammer and the anvil. Or between the devil and the deep blue sea. The story that we're going to talk about today, Israel's route to the Red Sea, I think these idioms that I just gave you fit pretty well. In fact, Chuck Swindoll, he preached through this story that's found in Exodus 13 and 14, and he titled his sermon, Between the Devil and the Deep Red Sea, which is fitting because it brings together this idea found in those sayings plus what we see in this passage. Now, in Exodus chapter 1 and chapter 2, we see the bondage of Israel. We see them in Egypt. We see a new Pharaoh had forgotten Joseph and had enslaved the people. The Israelites were multiplying despite their terrible conditions. And the new Pharaoh decided he needed to stop this growth because it could be a danger. You find that Moses is born, and you find the events that lead up to his escape where he goes off to Midian. Now in Exodus chapter 3 through the first part of 13, we see the deliverance of Israel. Moses is called, the 10 plagues come, you see the blood, the frogs, gnats, flies, livestock, boils, hail, locust, darkness, and the death of the firstborn. Then you see the first Passover happen. You see the Exodus itself where they pack up and leave, and then we see Passover instituted for the Jewish people. And then starting in the second part of 13, verse 17, we see the route of Israel as they head towards the Red Sea. Now in chapter 13, at the beginning, we see that God is using a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of cloud by night in order to guide the Israelites. Israel ends up being led by God, kind of in a meandering path, to a place near Baal Zephon, which geographically is like a perfect cul-de-sac. There's a couple different possibilities of where this place actually was, but all of the possibilities, it's like a cul-de-sac type region. On one side, obviously, you have the Red Sea, which can't be crossed by 1 or 2 million people, which was the number of the Jews at this point. On another side, you had the desert, which you really can't bring people out there because that would lead to certain death. And on a third side, you had the Egyptian forts in the cities. So each way you turned, you were going to end up in a bad spot if you were a fleeing people. Well, you could leave the way that you came in, but what we find is that Pharaoh had changed his mind. He had let them go, but he said, what have we done? Let's go get them back. And he sends many of his chariots and his army to go get the people of Israel. And so they're bearing down on them, and the Jewish people are sitting there, and they cry out to the Lord because they see no way out. In fact, there is no way out. They can go one way and drown. They can go another way, die in the desert. They can go a third way and just end up in the forts, which they'll be killed or recaptured. Or they can be killed or recaptured by the army that's bearing down on them. They're in a position of no help. They're between a rock and a hard place. They are between the devil and the deep Red Sea. Now, we could look at this story and say, what a terrible predicament. But I want you to remember back, who led them to this spot? It was God that led them there specifically. They followed the cloud and they followed the pillar of fire, and it led them to this spot. But why would God do that? Why would he bring them to a place that meant certain death or re-enslavement? And I think the answer is this. The Lord brought them there because there needed to be no confusion on who was going to deliver Israel. God had brought them to a place where there was no human hope. All they could do was decide to trust him. Now they were complaining, they were mad at Moses. They were like, you brought us here to die. Weren't there enough grave sites in Egypt for you to bring us here? This is even worse. But God brings them here, and God is going to be the one who delivers them. In fact, that's the point. I have brought you to a place to which there is nothing you can do but trust me. And this is a tough spot to be in. It was a tough spot for the people of Israel. And I think that God sometimes does this with us. He brings us to a place. He actually leads us to a place in which there's nothing we can do to trust. I think sometimes we have this idea in our head, well, if only we would follow the will of God, it would be all rainbows and unicorns. But that is not the case. That is not the picture that we see throughout the Bible. Now, are there times of great blessing? Yes, but there's also times that are very difficult. But those are also a blessing, because what God is doing in these places is teaching us that our good is found in Him and Him alone. Our good is found in God. And He will put us in a place where we have nothing to do but to see God work. That's what He does with Israel. And that's what He does for us. For Israel, the sea was parted. They went over on dry land. They escaped. And it wasn't merely that they escaped, but God brought the waters down upon that Egyptian army to deliver Israel, and they were able to move on. And I think that God does that oftentimes with us as well. He will bring us to a spot so that there will be no confusion that He is the one who delivers us. He delivers us, and then what we're called to do is remember that. Remember that deliverance. Remember how God has done it, so that in all points of life, we can understand that our good is found in God. There's a poem by a lady named Annie Johnson Flint, and I think it's fitting to this story. And it reads, "Pressed out of measure and pressed to all length, pressed so intensely it seemed beyond strength, pressed in the body and pressed in the soul, pressed in the mind till the dark surges roll, pressed by foes and pressured by friends, pressure on pressure till life nearly ends, pressed into loving the staff and the rod, pressed into knowing no helper but God, pressed into liberty where nothing clings, pressed into faith for impossible things, pressed into living a life for the Lord, pressed into living a Christ life outpoured." So when you're in those moments of great pressure, as the Israelites were, and you're like, "Lord, why did you bring me here?" We have been put in these spots because He is doing something, and He is doing something great. And He is the one who is to receive the glory. I hope you think about that. I hope that you'll keep that at the front of your mind. I'll be praying for you. Please pray for me. And Lord willing, I'll see you next week.